video, and we hope that you are healthy and safe and doing well during these times of quarantine and social distancing. We are doing a video about baking substitutions today. Baby wants to eat the table. And I thought now more than ever is the best time to do it. I know we can all still go out to the stores if we need to, but if we don't have to, we certainly shouldn't. So why not take this time to learn and spend some of our free time baking and trying different things just to see how they turn out with our different substitutions. With that, we will begin. I hope this is educational and fun for you. You can watch with your kids and with your family, and I think we'll have a lot of fun doing it. Also, I've tried my best to get rid of glare on my glasses, so I'm sorry if there's anything you see that's gonna bother you. I contemplated taking them off, but then I was like, they're staying. Okay, baking substitutions. So the way this video is gonna work is we're gonna go through kind of the different foundations of a recipe and why you need certain ingredients, and for each little piece and part of your recipe, what you can use to substitute. Something important to remember while using these baking substitutions is that they aren't going to be an exact match to what you normally use for your baked goods, so just keep that in mind. Remember it. Your baked good isn't going to come out exactly how it did with the original ingredients, but that doesn't mean it's going to come out bad. You might even like it better. You might totally hate it, and that's okay. That's the point of this, is to learn and grow and just become a better, more solid baker, knowing the different techniques and things that you can use. So before we begin, I'll kind of go over what I did, and this is something fun that you can do at home, especially with your kids, is I made little flashcards. I use just regular paper, but if you have flashcards at home, that's awesome. And I put different categories of ingredients in there, like so. And I'll be going through them throughout the video. It'll make a little bit more sense once I actually go through it, to show you the different aspects of a recipe and what you can do with them. What's also fun about these little cards is that you can take them, separate them by function, and then play Chopped or a little game at your house and take a recipe but sub out different ingredients just to see what happens. Something fun to do, pass the time and learn a little bit. And I'm also going to be making some more videos in the future where I will do the same, and so we can see how those substitutions turn out. I think that'll be fun. So to start out, the first and I would say most important part of every recipe is the thing that gives the baked good structure, and that's going to be flour. There's all different types of flour. The most common is wheat flour that comes bleached and unbleached. Bleached is a little bit less expensive than unbleached. And the main difference is that it's whiter. The reason you would want bleached flour in a recipe is if you're making a very white cake, you want it to be super pure white, that's when you would want to use bleached flour. Otherwise, it's totally cool to sub unbleached flour. It's not going to really affect the taste. There's also whole grain wheat flour. That's definitely gonna affect the taste and texture of your baked good because it has bigger pieces of grain in it, and it definitely changes the flavor. I've found I don't always like things made with whole grain flour, though it is a little bit healthier. There's nut flours like pistachio or almond. You know I love my almond flour when I'm making macarons. I also love pistachio flour. They make it really good. There's also coconut flour and buckwheat flour. All of those flours that aren't the wheat, so the nut flours, coconut, buckwheat, there's rice flour, those are all gluten-free, which is super cool. You'll see that they do affect the texture of your baked good. If I used almond flour instead of wheat flour in a cupcake, it is going to be a different texture. Does not mean it's going to be bad though. You might actually like it better. Who knows? So that's the main thing, flour. If you don't have flour of any kind, it will be kind of hard to make a cake or a cupcake, but there are a couple things you can do. It's definitely going to change the consistency and the flavor. I've actually never tried these things, but I would assume you could probably use boiled potatoes, chickpeas, or beans in place of flour. They're big enough and substantial enough where they could take the place. You're just gonna get a very different type of ingredient. It's gonna be a lot softer. You can't make a crunchy cookie most likely with those things, but it's just an idea if you wanna play around with your ingredients. All right, that's flours. Moving on. Next, we'll go on to our binders, the things that hold your recipe together and also add a little bit of moisture and texture to your baked good. That is primarily eggs. If you have like egg white or egg white substitute, egg substitute, you obviously could use that for egg on like there should be like a conversion on the packaging if you have that at home, and that should work just fine. The only time an egg substitution wouldn't work is if you have to make a meringue. The egg whites, even if it's egg white substitute, I feel like it just might not be, it might have more moisture, it just might not work as well. Some other things you can use are applesauce. I drew a picture, but I also have real applesauce right here. If you have like one of these cups, this is half a cup. So that makes it pretty easy. It's a 1/4 cup of applesauce per egg. So if you need 2 eggs, it would just be a whole cup of this, which makes it really easy. Applesauce also adds a lot of moisture to your baked good, which is nice. So if you do it in like a cookie recipe, you might want to cut down a little bit because it might be too soft. But if you're doing a cake, I would definitely do the whole 1/4 cup per egg because you definitely want your moisture in your cakes and cupcakes. Another thing you can substitute are bananas. I don't have any bananas, but here's a picture. 1/2 banana is equivalent to an egg. And again, it adds moisture, texture, and works as a good binder. There's a couple more things you could use. You could use chia seeds. If you are a health nut or you like to make overnight little oats or chia smoothies, you just take a tablespoon of chia seeds and 3 tablespoons of water, mix it together, and it'll get kind of like this jelly substance that's a lot like an egg, which is really cool and can also help you have a nice vegan recipe if you don't want eggs as well. And then lastly, you could do peanut butter. 3 tablespoons of peanut butter is equivalent to 1 egg. You will notice that will change the flavor though, so keep that in mind. And also you definitely wouldn't want to do that with a nut allergy. Same with those nut flours, obviously. You don't want to use those if someone in your house has a nut allergy. Want to keep that in mind. The next part of our baked good structure is going to be the flavor and also the structure. And that comes with our fats, like our butters and our shortenings. Butter is made with cream, comes from cows. You can also get butter made from different animals, but I would say most common is cow. Shortening is a butter-like substance that's made with vegetables. It's also known as Crisco. You'll find it at the store as Crisco. It's white, kind of gross, but I have used it in recipes and it's been good. You just don't get that like salty, like buttery flavor from it. It's a little more sterile in terms of flavor, if that makes any sense. Some other substitutions are just cooking oil. If you're substituting cooking oil for butter, you'll want to use just a little bit less. So I would say start with like 3/4 cup of oil if you need like 1 cup of butter, and then add a little more if you think you need to. You don't want to add too much, just since it's liquidy, it could really mess with the consistency of your baked good, depending on what you're making. And lastly, if you want a healthier alternative, you could always use avocado instead of oil. I've done this before. It makes a really creamy, delicious, moist, soft, fluffy cupcake. But when doing it, remember it's going to change the color because it's green, and it will add some flavor. So I usually will substitute avocado only if I'm doing like a chocolate cupcake or pumpkin, cinnamon, something with a strong flavor and a darker color, because you're gonna have a funny looking vanilla cupcake if you use avocado. Oh, and then one last ingredient, which I didn't make a card for, but I have, is coconut oil. Coconut oil is a great substitution for butter. It adds a nice sweet flavor too, and it's a little bit healthier of an alternative, which is nice. All of those things are pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio besides the oil, which is nice. It's an easy substitution for those things. Next up, we have our sweeteners, which also add moisture. They also decrease the amount of gluten that's produced in your product if you're using a wheat flour. And that's primarily sugar. If there's more sugar in your baked good, the less gluten you develop. The more gluten you develop, the denser the product. So you'll see there's not a ton of sugar in a bread recipe, and like a yeast bread recipe, because you want that gluten to develop to have a nice like elastic dough. But you'll see there's a ton of sugar in like cakes and like quick breads and cookies, because you don't want gluten to develop if you want like a nice fluffy texture. So obviously we have our regular granulated sugar. If you don't have that, you can sub 1-to-1 with brown sugar. I lost my card. Here it is. 1-to-1. What is brown sugar? Brown sugar is granulated sugar that's mixed with molasses. Molasses is a thick, gooey substance. To be honest, I don't actually know like what it's made out of. It's gross. Like, it has a very strong flavor. But that's what brown sugar is. And that's why brown sugar has like that deeper flavor. It's because it's got this stuff in it. And that's also why your baked good will be a little bit darker, have a different flavor if you add brown sugar, but it is a 1-to-1 easy conversion. You also could use molasses. If you have molasses and you don't have any other these ingredients, I don't really know what you have going on in your kitchen, but you never know. Desperate times, you could definitely use molasses. Molasses has a very strong flavor, so definitely expect it to change the taste of your recipe. I would definitely recommend like adding milk or yogurt or something to cut down on the molasses flavor if that's your last resort, or put it in a chocolate dish. I feel like chocolate and molasses would be like a really good combination, or a caramel dish, something like that. But if you don't have sugar, you're not making caramel, so I don't understand. And then lastly, we have powdered sugar. If you have a recipe that needs powdered sugar, you can try regular sugar, granulated. It's definitely gonna be a different texture. A lot of the times when you want powdered sugar, it's because you're having like a lighter, fluffier dish or baked good. So if you add regular granulated sugar, that can affect it. I have tried to put my regular granulated sugar into a food processor and blend it. Took forever. Didn't really end up turning into powdered sugar. So I don't really recommend doing that. Just try to use the regular sugar and see how it turns out. If you don't have granulated sugar and you only have powdered sugar, which we might all come to at some point in time, you can substitute it. 1 cup granulated sugar is roughly equivalent to 1 1/4 cup of confectioner's sugar. And you'll see on here, I have like, so confectioner's sugar is the same as powdered sugar is the same as icing sugar. It's just that really finely ground sugar. They grind it in a mill and then they add a stabilizer in it so that it doesn't clump together. Like cornstarch, I believe. They put cornstarch in it. What if you don't have any of that? Well, you could always do honey. Here's my little honey bear. Honey is a great substitute for sugar, and it even can be a little bit healthier. You want to use 3/4 cup of honey per cup of sugar. And then also keep in mind that that might affect the texture a little bit too, since it is a liquid. So you might want to pull back on other liquids that you're putting into your baked good, or add like a little more flour if you're going to use honey. And then lastly, we have our leaveners. There's only 2 of them. What's a leavener? They help your baked good rise. They create CO2 in your baked good, and the CO2 rises through and helps your baked good rise. If you use too much of these, it's gonna create too much CO2 that's gonna rise like way up, all the way out of your baked good, and then it'll fall flat and be really dense and hard. So if you've ever had that happen to you, you might have added way too much of your leaveners. These are very similar. The first one is baking soda. Baking soda is just pure sodium bicarbonate. It is a chemical that reacts with acid in your baked good. So that's like, could be yogurt, milk, sugar, eggs, any of that kind of stuff. It reacts with that and it creates CO2 that helps your baked good rise. It starts working right away when you put it into your recipe, so you want to make sure you get that into the oven as soon as you can. Don't let it sit out on the counter, or else you might lose all those great properties of the baking soda. Baking powder is very similar to baking soda. In fact, what it is baking soda mixed with an acid already. Usually it's cream of tartar or something similar to that. And the way this works is it works in 2 steps. It starts to work when you add the liquid, and it works in the oven. So this one, it doesn't matter as much if you leave it on the counter. I feel like any baked good you don't want to sit for too long, but that's just something of note. If your recipe calls for baking powder and you don't have it, you could always use baking soda. You mix with cream of tartar yourself, so the conversion is 1 teaspoon of baking powder is equivalent to, I have to look because I always forget, a 1/2 teaspoon cream of tartar with a 1/4 teaspoon baking soda. Mix it together, it's like your baking powder. If you need baking soda and you only have baking powder, you could use baking powder instead, but it is going to affect the consistency of your baked good, so keep that in mind. These in general are pretty important. If you don't have these, I would say you don't want to try to make a cake. I would say you could make a cookie. You can make like a shortbread cookie because those don't require leaveners. And then there's also salt. Salt is just for flavor. It can also help kind of bind your other ingredients together and make them work more harmoniously. If you don't have salt, you don't have to use it, but you might get a baked good that's like way too sweet. So with that, enjoy. And that's it, guys. That's all there is to it. So remember, your main ingredients to a recipe is your element that provides structure. That's your flours. Your element that's a binder and texture. That's your eggs, applesauces, and bananas, as well as peanut butter and chia seeds. Your fats and flavor. Sweeteners. And leaveners. You can even get more creative. There's a lot of things I didn't mention that you could substitute. Like if you need milk, you could do yogurt instead. You could also do sour cream in place of milk, or even just water. You could try different juices, different fruits in your recipes and see how that affects the texture. Now is the time where we can kind of like use our free time to try different experiments, which can make it kind of fun. And again, like I really encourage you to work with like your kids or your friends or whoever, make these little cards and like play games and pick them and try different recipes. So I'm gonna be coming out with a couple more videos, and I want to do some kid-friendly videos that show instructions on baking things. So if you have any ideas or anything you want to see, comment below, send me a message on Instagram or through my website, dreamylifebakery.com. I would be happy to do anything you're looking for. So thanks for watching and stay healthy. This has been a Dreamy Life Bakery production. Happy baking!